Ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends, on the 9th of May, the post formerly known as Eastern Marshlands was declared to be no more by its founders. This had apparently been in the planning for months, and we want it to be
Ladies
known,
and gentlemen, comrades and friends,
and we want it to be known that we take no issue with the decision to close Eastern Marshlands. We were, after all, just guest comrades, and we weren't involved with EML's founding, day-to-day running, or moderation. We were, however, very honoured and happy to be a part of it, and it's going to be something that we will miss greatly. Laughs were had, debate was enjoyed, and through it, we forged strengthened existing ones. Following on from this, it should also be made abundantly clear that the Coming Insurrection of EML. This is something that's been in the works for around a year now, and was actually going to be launched in the summer of 2019 before we joined EML. However, now that EML is gone, we've decided to launch the Coming Insurrection as our own project of creating new, unapologetically radical. It is our hope that we'll go above and beyond the standard run-of-the-mill leftist podcast. We're emphatically not interested in creating petty reality TV style drama that other podcasts tend to do. We're not interested in forming cults of personality, and most importantly, we are not breadtubers. We don't care about breadtube, and we want nothing to do with it. And above all, we are not a book club. Unless there's something relevant to the modern era, you won't find us regurgitating the works of men who have been dead for hundreds of years. The struggle is not 100 years ago. The struggle is now, and it requires us to live in the present, with our heads facing forward instead of nose deep in a textbook. In short, we're just your standard revolutionary leftists, spreading the word and message of revolutionary struggles around the world, while discussing the greater revolutionary struggle in terms that are accessible to all. We don't want fame, we don't want recognition, we are but the messengers of this cause, as are we all at the end of the day. With our initial statement out of the way, we'd like to welcome you all, our dear comrades, to the very first instalment of Drinks and Discourse, the flagship podcast of the Coming Insurrection. I am your host, Comrade Crypto, and joining me tonight are my two phenomenal co-hosts, Senna and Theo. Say hi, guys.
Hello.
Something Sweden. Look, I had something prepared. I forgot what I was gonna say. It was gonna be very. I don't know. Just,
Oh, you're cute.
I'm angry at the Swedes. Okay. Something Sweden.
Okay.
I had something. I forgot what I was gonna say.
Yes, now that we've got the introductions out of the way, I'd like to, now that we've got the introduction out of the way, and before we showcase the two main topics for tonight, we'd like to touch upon the final drama that befell Eastern Marshlands before its closure.
Before we do that, some people are saying they're having trouble with the audio.
What kind of trouble?
This says the audio keeps cutting out.
I think I'm able to hear you guys just fine.
This says the audio keeps out.
The annoying fucking thing is I can't...
Seems to be resolved, actually.
Okay. Alright, good. So... Okay, so, before we showcase our two main topics for tonight, we'd like to touch upon the final drama that befell Eastern Marshlands before its closure, as we widely consider it to be the catalyst for its end. I know we said that we wouldn't be doing drama topics on the show, and of course all of us were very proud and happy to be a part of EML, and none of this is done with any spite towards Eastern Marshlands or our time towards it at any point, but to completely ignore its final drama and hush it under the carpet would be an insult to its memory, and a gross irresponsibility on our part, as we were the ones who blew the whistle. For those unaware, and to put it very bluntly, the former host of Evening with Comrades, Dip Dap, fucked up. On the 2nd of May 2020, in the aftermath of the drama that befell the revolutionary POC organisation Black Hammer, DipDap, along with another Twitter user, were caught out encouraging people to report Black Hammer to the Southern Poverty Law Centre, an organisation that works extremely closely with federal law enforcement, including the FBI. And all of this was done to have them listed as a registered hate group. In response to DipDap doing this, myself, Senna and Theo took the decision to blow the whistle. We demanded that he post a public apology, that he step down from hosting Evening with Comrades, and that he remove himself from being involved with EML, which he did. Now, let's clear up our stance on this. All of us are militant anti-fascists. We believe that to be an anti-Semite, regardless of race, gender, or sexual orientation, is inexcusable. It should mean a fist to the face at best, and at worst, a face against the wall. All of us collectively called out Black Hammer on being anti-Semitic. All of us were in favour of other revolutionary organisations stopping any and all cooperation with them over their anti-Semitism. We also believe that Black Hammer's leader is a borderline cult leader, and many of its members were calling out the organisation for its cult-like atmosphere before they were subsequently ejected from it. All in all, Black Hammer remains to be an organisation that we emphatically encourage our comrades to stay away from. The leadership are identified up and have created a cult-like atmosphere. Our issue is not the motive behind what DipDap did, which in all honesty is completely understandable. The leader of Black Hammer made horrific anti-Semitic statements and deserved to get collectively dogpiled for it, and in all honesty, probably worse. But our issue with DipDap is the action he took. We have 3 points to make in regard to this. Firstly, from an international perspective, and this applies to every single radical organisation the world over, inviting a liberal third party into revolutionary spaces, particularly one that works closely with the state's domestic intelligence agency, is asking for trouble. We have enough of an issue with federal informants trying to worm their way into revolutionary organisations in America already, and they've already had great success. And if this weren't enough, you need to think about the bigger picture as well. Inviting a non-profit organisation that reports to federal law enforcement is potentially inviting them into a web of other revolutionary organisations that the reported organisation works with, has contact with, and organises alongside. Through any action that was taken that he might have had a role in, genuine revolutionaries could have been put at risk. I would also like to point out this statement from the Southern Poverty Law Centre themselves regarding Antifa and the militant revolutionary left in the United States, and this is coming directly from their FAQ, and I quote, "The SPLC condemns violence in all its forms, including the violent acts of far-left street movements like Antifa. Make your own judgments. These people are not our comrades, and inviting them into our spaces is dangerous, even more so considering the fact they work with federal law enforcement." All of this notwithstanding, it also simply comes down to this. Who has the responsibility of casting out class traitors in our movements? Who has the responsibility of dealing with reactionary elements in our spaces? We do. If the leadership of Black Hammer claims that they are a revolutionary leftist organisation while spouting anti-Semitism, it is our responsibility as revolutionary leftists to ensure that they are cut off of all support, deplatformed, and that our comrades are informed to stay away from them. And even if they were not leftists, if they were out and out fascists, it would still be our job to deplatform them. To run to federal informants, begging them to deplatform Black Hammer for us, is an action that reeks of laziness. And when you're involved in revolutionary politics, as we all are, laziness is dangerous, and it shirks our duty as militant anti-fascists to defend our communities and our spaces, and to create that counterbalance to state power. The state doesn't keep us safe. We keep us safe. Beyond that, relying on the state to deal with anti-Semites and reactionaries is like the turkey relying on the butcher to carve up the ham and leave the turkey be. The knife of the state that falls on reactionaries will fall on us all as well eventually, and encouraging that is putting all of us in danger. Now the third point, the final point, and arguably one of the most important, the point of the snitch mentality, along with the FBI's relationship with POC liberationist organisations, and the wider implications that has for the movement. I'm going to leave this point to Senna, as she's honestly much more well versed in the subject than I am, and then we can discuss this issue in earnest before moving on to our other two topics for the evening. Senna?
Yeah. First off, Southern Poverty Law Center is totally Fed affiliated, and they've been keeping tabs on any kind of extremists, including left-wing extremists, for years. They're not our friends, and you know who else those kinds of people are not your friend? The friends? Marginalized people. Of all kinds. Now, keep in mind, this all majority in the South. That is where Black Hammer is sort of entered, and as well as obviously the Southern Poverty Law Center. And what is the South notorious for having even worse problems with than the rest of the... Oh yeah, racism. Very violent fucking racism. This is so unsafe to even tons of innocent people. What was going on was their fucking leader saying shitty fucking... It's terrible. But that guy should not be taken as representative of everyone. And to punish these innocent people who are, you know, very much radicals themselves and potentially threaten their lives because of this is absurd.
Whether the radicals or not, you don't want the feds.
Oh, exactly. It doesn't even... And maybe you're kind of quiet.
This is literally just the millimeter thing. You'll just have to...
Yeah, I know. That's why I said something.
Hey, it's Mike. But the alternative is all the way down and constantly breathing into it with my nose. And I don't think anyone wants that. But, yeah. All things considered, I think there's I don't know. I'd add in statements. Yeah, there are a lot of examples I could name, but I think people will get the general idea.
Yeah, I mean...
Reportedly still some mild issues with people cutting in and out. It's probably your connection, Crip.
Fuck.
No, I've got people cutting out from me on Discord as well. It's not...
Okay, so it's not the stream, at least. It's just Discord shitting the bed as usual. Fantastic.
Well, he's cutting out for me as well, so...
Well, yeah, that's still Discord shitting the bed, baby.
But, yeah, the issue with it, obviously, again, it ties back into the other 2 points. Involving police in our spaces, particularly federal law enforcement, is bad enough. Inviting them into POC radical spaces is even worse. Because, as we all know, the federal law enforcement in the United States is not very friendly towards POC liberationist organisations. To any of them. And the issue is that if you invite them into these spaces, like, I can guarantee you not everyone in Black Hammer worships Black Hammer's leader, or doesn't worship the floor he walks on. In all honesty, I think a lot of them have issues with the leadership.
Oh yeah, no, there were tons of people who were trying to do something. It was a bit complicated because people who spoke out in a way in which leadership found out about it got kicked out. At least that is what I have heard according to people who are closer to that situation. Sorry about that, just something distracting happened. But yeah, it's just there's just so much wrong with that. I actually ended up, without divulging too much on the details, for obvious reasons, I ended up ranting a bit about it to my mom. Context, my mom is a massive fucking boob. And even she was horrified by that, especially when I mentioned that this happened in the...
Yeah.
When even someone like that sees that there's something wrong here, yeah.
One of the most effective disinformation, rather de-education campaigns, not just the United States, but primarily the United States has put into effect over the past 30 years is instilling the idea that that all social interactions are purely based on individual interactions, and that there is no actual overarching collective to any of it. That's been one of the most effective campaigns in that sort, because it means it diverts responsibility from the collective, because by claiming it doesn't that there is such a thing as toxic individualism as well.
Yeah.
That ties into that. Yeah. It's a form of victim blaming, obviously.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
But I think what this shows is that, you are not immune to propaganda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather the environments you grew up in, because whether you realize it or not, we all have those ideas, those attitudes, whether we, actively realize it or not. And, sometimes those ideas can be very destructive.
Yeah. And obviously, I don't think any of us are about to kowtow to Black Hammer's leadership by any means of the imagination, because I'm going to be completely fucking honest, Black Hammer's statements were, the leadership of Black Hammer's statements were fucking horrific. And were incredibly anti-Semitic. And I think anyone, just bends over backwards to defend this kind of thing is fucking, honestly, an identity reductionist, and honestly, in my mind, not a revolutionary. But the issue here, like I said in the opening statement, our issue with what happened wasn't the motive behind it. Our issue with what happened was the action. You could call out these people, and you could work with different leftist organisations to deplatform them. These are our spaces. These spaces need to remain ours. We cannot invite federal or state or local law enforcement of the circumstances. If there's a problem within our spaces, we are the ones to deal with it. It's our problem.
Yeah, this is kind of like, I know this is a weird comparison, but it's like trying to stop the kidnapping of a babe by shooting the babe.
Okay, I know you said baby, but it kind of cut out a second there, and you said babe, so I thought this is like stopping the kidnapping of babe by shooting babe.
Yeah, sorry,
babe,
honey.
Yeah, we're gonna kidnap Babe Ruth.
No. I was thinking more along the lines of.
I don't care if he's dead. We're still gonna.
No, I'm sorry, babe, but get up against the wall.
Yeah,
it's been decided.
How could you do this to me?
I was honestly thinking Babe the pig, to be quite honest. As in, somebody's going to try and kidnap Babe the pig, who's probably long fucking dead.
Well, fucking deserves it, fucking class traitor. I don't know.
Exactly,
Babe's a class traitor. I'm just assuming.
He's a bougie pig. He's literally a bougie pig. He needs to die. He needs to get the guillotine, boys.
Speaking of people that need to die, the Swedes, man.
Fucking filthy social.
Thank you, baby.
I have a lot of friends in Sweden, but most of them agree that the state of Sweden is among the most horrific in Northern Europe.
Oh yeah, and yet everyone seems to fucking shill for Nordic-style social democracy, despite the fact that it literally bans worker strikes. But I feel like, obviously, like again, like I think we can maybe move on to not onto our new topics, but I think onto the whole topic of discussion that comes from this and lessons that we can learn, and that is how do we deal with problematic elements in our spaces? How do we deal with reactionary politics that creep into our movements?
Okay. Generally speaking, I want to preface this with a tactic that you should take whenever you're taking actions that will directly or indirectly impact the lives of other people. Before you do anything that will have consequences, like, don't just do things to do things. That's dumb and you will hurt people because
Yeah, the idea you have will inevitably be flawed if you don't fucking think it out, and it will likely be based on the shit you were raised with, which is bad.
Yeah. And obviously, the thing that we need to remember is zero tolerance for anti Semitism. Zero fucking tolerance for anti Semitism. That needs to be made clear, especially. As we've said, our issue was not with. Our issue was not with the motive, but it was with the action. But the issue is like, you can see this. Another example that we can probably use for this is transphobia in leftist groups. Do we go running to the police about that? Like,
considering that, yeah.
Yeah, it's like we don't go
I mean,
running...
it's even more of a thing.
Yeah, it is.
It's even more of an issue there because at least the government does not yet deny that black people exist. Well, deny. I say deny, but it's.
We know what you mean.
Yeah. There's. If you're lucky enough to live somewhere where there are laws in place, say, you know, then even there, I'm trying to find my words. Give me a moment.
It's alright.
Cute.
See, I live in a country that, legally speaking, has a not great amounts of legal protections, but above average kind of protection. And when we're talking about Europe as a whole, although that's kind of sullied by outliers like Poland and, believe it or not, France.
Yeah.
Where, you know, the Swedes who still want us sterilized.
Yep.
I didn't even think about that when I was getting angry at Swedes. It's actually really stupid. The reason I'm angry at the Swedes is because Swedish light tanks keep killing me in War Thunder, but I suppose the real world implications of why they might want me dead might apply too.
You burgled into an IKEA.
Yeah, but it turns out it was the infinite IKEA and I got murdered.
The eternal IKEA?
The infinite, it's an SCP. I gotta...
Okay.
It's like an IKEA that's like a literal, like, endless plane.
Jesus
and
Christ.
Like, there's... The attendants are like faceless mannequins, and when it turns night, they tell you to leave the store, which you can't, and try to kill you.
Okay, that is literal hell. Thank you for that.
Nothing but beds.
No, it's just Stockholm.
Tables for
it's just
miles.
Stockholm. No, yeah, it's actually really weird. Regardless of that, there is really no surefire way of preventing transphobes from getting access to certain parts of certain spaces. When they are discovered, there is no other way than to yeet them. This is, I think, something that's underappreciated. There is a difference between I think there are two types of optics, right? There's the kind of facetious sort of thing that people do to appear more worthy to the cause, right? But then there's the other type of optic, which is really just upholding one's internal integrity. And I think there is a very clear distinction to be made between those two, right? Right. For example, I think there's a very big difference between, trying to deplatform someone for something they said 10 years ago that they have publicly disavowed or whatever, right? And bringing something against someone as a direct consequence of action they have taken within the span of their movement.
Yeah. I think the
thing...
Right, I think... go on.
Like, if, let's say, fucking 12-year-old me said something that is probably, transphobic, egg. I was a shithead at 12, but who wasn't? The thing is, you grow from that, you learn from that, and then take in contrast what Dip Dap did, whether he realized afterwards that it was wrong or not, right? There is action to be taken. Whether you think he's a bad person for that or not, that's besides the point. But you cannot sit there and not take act because it would damage the integrity of your movement.
Exactly. It's the same thing with, I think another really big one is like when you've got people who are abusers in your movements. We've noticed this a lot on like Left Twitter and BreadTube. There are a lot of people who are fucking abusers on BreadTube, and they get given a fucking green pass because
BedTube.
BedTube. Go bed.
That's just the ASMR channels that like help you sleep. That's BedTube.
Calmly whisper reading the Coming Insurrection book and the Communist Manifesto into your ear to try and lull you off to sleep. But,
I love to stand the 1848 revolution when I go to bed.
Guy shit. But
man, hang those Habsburgs.
But as I was saying, BreadTube has a big fucking problem with abusers, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
And the issue is that people aren't willing to call them out and do an action and take action to remove these people because it happened, oh, it's okay, it's fine, it was a one-off thing. If it happened 10 years ago, fair. But not if it happened immediately. Once something happens, you need to take action against it. If you want to maintain the integrity of your movement, as Theo said, you need to take action against these people. You cannot claim to be a leftist. You cannot even claim less to be a revolutionary if you harbour abusers, if you harbour rapists, if you harbour bigots of any shape and form, and especially if you harbour snitches. If you have a snitch in your movement, they need to go. Those people...
Oh yes, snitches are fucking dangerous.
Yeah, those people destroy movements. Do you want to know one of the main reasons why revolutionary organisations in the United States have risen and fell so often? Snitches, government informants. That's why the Communist Party of the United States is fucking toothless. It's why they have no revolutionary capacity whatsoever, because they have been run through... They've been run through like fucking woodwork.
It's estimated that in 1995, between 35 and 47% of all members of the CPUSA were informants for the FBI.
Yeah.
And it's also estimated that 70% of the leadership was. Now, if that's not a fifth column, I don't know what is. In fact, that's a sixth column at that point.
I just real quick, I've been asked to post a little shout out in here. A shout out to the Glasgow Underground. You know who you are.
Ooh.
No, but no, it's a slightly off topic, but I know the reason why people don't want to call out these YouTubers and whatnot. It's because and I can understand the reasoning, but there really is no good solution to this. It's because these spreadings are seen as a sort of asset, and if all of those assets are gone, there are none left. But the thing is, sometimes you have to
spreading the word if the person who's doing that is also harming these movements from the inside. It's a lose-lose.
Yeah, you have to let some of those opportunities die. You cannot take every step if not every step leads in the right direction. It'll take longer, we'll have more failures, but we'll have those anyway.
Yeah. Like something like this, something like, shitty bread tubers, like a fucking sexual abuser or something. That's a lot of them, to be honest. That's not gonna get anywhere. Because what you're gonna get is, people will see their content and be like, oh yeah, I get that. First off, people who are able to be convinced by anyone, just talking to them like a human being, is not going to change their opinion because of a YouTube video. That's just not how it works. But second off, if they see that, and then they see that people are just they see that these people are just fucking terrible, they're like, really? That this is who these people prop up? This is what you guys are about? You're full of dog shit, fuck off.
I know what it is as well. Ironically, it's kind of a subverted belief in horseshoe theory. It's the idea that there is a counterpart to everything that exists on the right. It's the idea that there has to be some kind of counterpart to the fucking right-wing grifters that you see on plopping around everywhere, but that's not really the case, because those people are propagandists, essentially funded by the states and the powers that be, and
so
not exactly something that we have, because we're not a top-down structure, or at least we shouldn't be.
Yeah. I think. Go on.
That's kind of. Obviously, I am not going to sit there and tell other people, and bulls especially, how to organize their movements, but generally speaking, you don't want a top-down structure in sort of any sort of loose sort of association. You don't want a top-down structure because, first of all, you can't exert proper control over them, which negates the one advantage that a stratified organization has, which you can't even bring to bear in this sort of, part of the struggle. If we're talking about a militia, that's a bit of a different thing, but you're in the US, you're not going to have any need to form a militia, or at least not the opportunity and the means to do so.
Yeah.
If we're talking about, I don't know, the Philippines, that's a bit of a different bit of a different story.
And I think with that we will collect our final statements on this topic before we move on to the next topic. My final statement on the topic is this: it's simply, regardless of if they're your friends, if you're close with them, keep snitches out of your fucking movements, because they will destroy you. Keep racists, rapists, anti-Semites, abusers, paedophiles, kick them out of your fucking movements. Do not give them a single bit of breathing room, because the second they get a bit of breathing room, the second that they get let off, they will breed and infest and tear down your movement. Zero tolerance for snitches, whoever the fuck they are. And to hell with anybody that supports snitching. To hell with anybody that supports working with the state. Keep the state out of our movements. Our movements are ours. Keep them that way. And keep the cops, the feds, and the government out of them.
All I say, think before you fuck up. Just sit down. And second of all, let's turn Stockholm into a blast crater, because honestly, they deserve it.
Any final words from you, Senna?
Let's chemically sterilize them.
Just because someone did a good thing doesn't mean you need to keep them around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
Not to say that everyone's fucking disposable, but if someone is doing harm and is content to keep doing harm, you're out of other options unless you really just want to, be okay with that. And if that's more important to you, that you keep that person that you have this parasocial relationship to, keep that image of thing rather than protect people by not letting dangerous people stay around in our movement. Consider that you might not be as much of a leftist as you fucking think you are. I'm gonna be on it.
Agreed.
It's antithetical to those values, inherently.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's also an extension of the thought, hey, I wish this wouldn't have happened. And while the answer to that, in a lot of people's mind, pretended it didn't, well, okay, who are you throwing under the bus there? What's really... Sure, they could have chose not to be an asshat, but, could
Yeah,
have.
if you're in that situation, that's their making.
Yeah. And I think with that we will move on to our next topic, which is the collapse of ism in the United States, aka Democrats get fucked, get ready for another 4 years of Trump. So, unless you've been living under the past couple of months, you will know that Bernie Sanders has dropped out of the presidential race. Who could have fucking thought that, guys? It's not as though we were constantly fucking saying that he was going to be a disappointment for years. It's not as though we kept telling the left in America not to keep making this fucking mistake of fucking hoping that a social democrat would get anywhere near close to the White House. It's not as... No at all. Yeah, just... oh yeah, totally revolution now, seeing as how it's between Trump and Biden, right? So, as always, Sanders has dropped out. There are no social democrat options open for the Democratic Party, and they have elected to choose Joe Biden as their presidential candidate. With, what's her name? Something like that? Amy Klobuchar.
Yeah.
Amy Klobuchar.
I want to preface this
Remembering the weird vorart someone made of her, that's all I really fucking
You know why all of that is really funny to me? Because Klo is German for toilet.
Oh my god!
Well, she appears to be a shithead anyway.
Yeah.
But the...
Now...
I think the what we need to keep in mind here, obviously when the election comes down to it, it is going to be between Trump and Biden. That is going to be the definitive what is happening. So, the thing that we have to keep in mind...
You want me to shoot her?
That's the thing. You guys already know my stance on this. Reject electoralism entirely. And honestly, I think that's what the American left needs to do. They need to reject federal elections entirely. They will never deliver any candidate that will help us. I don't even care if because let's be honest. And then I think there was something that Ocasio-Cortez, the OC, did something stupid a while ago. Fucking she supports the police. She fucking has endorsed Biden for president, despite all of the fucking shady shit that's associated with Biden. So the issue is, and I think that we need to talk about this specifically, because we can talk for fucking ages about the election. What we need to talk about is what should the left's response to this what is the left's response to what should the left's response be to the election? We do.
Well, all right. I want to split this statement in two parts because there's what we should do and what will undoubtedly happen. And it is obviously what should be done is to abandon federal politics for the stage of, first of all, networking, second of all, the stage of localized, not even elections, but local community action. You can do the most work, in my eyes, by engaging yourself in, the local areas. Pretty much all areas, with a few exceptions, have their own sort of assemblies or whatever. But if you get yourselves involved, not even in the electoral part, but just become politically or otherwise active in your area, you're going to reach a lot more people than you would through federal elections, simply because people will only listen to you if you end up succeeding. And that's a lot easier in where you're talking a few hundred people rather than a rigged system of a few tens of millions of people.
Mm-hmm. And I think, as you said as well, like, there is a... Go on.
Can I? The second part is that's what should happen. What will happen, because that's what always ends up happening in the face of this electoral disappointment. Not just talking about the US, just in general. Going back a few hundred years, this is what happens every time. Organization will continue, but people have gotten themselves into this idea that that's how we want to do it. That's what we want to do, and they won't get out of that. They just won't. Individually, there's little we can do about that. That's a people that have separated themselves off the greater movement and have divided their attention to this is how we're going to do it, and that's all they have become. That is kind of how social democracy became a thing in the first place. It was from the Second Internationale, where the revolution in Russia happened, but people who clung onto Kautsky and his dumb reformists were like, no, we got this. This is how we're going to do this. This is how we're going to do that. And their genuine insurrectionary movements are kind of a thorn in what is perceived to be, or rather supposed to be, some kind of victory. That's what happened at the end of the First World War. The Social Democrats were in power now.
And I think...
Oh, what do you mean, Liebe proclaim a council republic? Well, we're just gonna have to shoot him, because, what were we trying to do again?
Yeah, and I think as well, it would be useful to get Senna's input on this as well, seeing as how she does live in the United States.
Yeah. First off, democracy, any method of reformism, anything short of just entirely splitting from, larger capitalist-controlled society is not going to work. It's a hindrance. Nothing less. The only way you're going to get anywhere is by providing alternatives to the state and getting militaristic.
Exactly.
That is the only thing. Because guess what?
Can you... just so I can get an idea what exactly you mean, can you explain what you mean by militaristic in this context?
Be armed, don't fucking do fucking liberal horseshit. That kind of thing.
Right, because that can also be construed as meaning form top-down organizations.
No, absolutely not.
I think
that's not going to work either.
I think militant would be the way to describe it. I think
you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I think I absolutely.
Look, sorry, I spoke.
It's okay. No. But I agree with you. I think the United States left has a big thing that I've noticed with the American left is a lot of very squeamish about the idea of getting armed. A lot of them have refused to kill the liberal in their heads that says, "Oh no, we need gun control. We need." They've kind of like gotten really squeamish about having access to firearms. Which I'm going to be honest with you guys, in America, the f***s are armed to the teeth. The capitalists are armed to the teeth. The police and the army are armed to the teeth. And what the fuck are we? Are you comfortable with just having baseball bats in the face of an AR-15? No. The only thing that is going to overthrow capitalism, when it is armed to the fucking teeth as it is in the United States, is an armed left. You have the opportunity in America to get armed, to train yourself. You have the opportunity to do that. You need to take it before it's too late. And the whole thing in America specifically as well is a lot of these guys are too focused on top-down structures. A lot of these guys are like, they think that we should, and not even that, they just, a lot of, we also need to cast aside the idea that the United States is going to be a country after it's over. Because that's the thing that I've noticed is another lot of American leftists are very squeamish about the idea of abolishing the United States. The United States needs to be abolished in the same way that the United Kingdom needs to be abolished.
Yeah, it is a state built on violent, fascistic genocide, and there is no way around that. There is no redeeming. This needs to burn, and what we need to be doing is providing an alternative so that people don't have to suffer more than they already are gonna when it burns. There's no way to avoid trouble with that entirely, but god damn it, we could be doing a lot more instead of sitting on our asses and praying God Lord Bernie to save the day. It's not gonna work. And people who... I understand not wanting to do violence. I don't want to either, but I recognize that there's no way out. There's no other choice.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, what? Can you really just sit down with a fascist and have tea with them about this? Can you really... let's get Jeff Bezos. Let's just talk to him, you know? Get him to let go of all the wealth of his empire or whatever. Fucking right. That's not gonna work.
The issue is that... go on.
That's a fairy tale.
May I?
Sure.
It's... in a lot of cases, not recognizing that you can't talk to them, and more the let's not talk about it. It's more of an you look at it in this head, you realize but for one reason or another, everyone has their own inner workings. The switch might go, but people don't talk about it. It's like this, we'll do this and that. And then there's a whole bunch of space, but then they're gone. But people don't want to talk about what has to happen, and as a result, people are unwilling to... Perhaps not even that. The people are just unwilling to give up comforts unless they are forced out of it. Which is actually something that might... actually will, in the long run, mean that at one point or another, these types of things will grow, mainly because of the imminent economic collapse that will wreak state cohesion in pretty much all areas, except the military. But with state cohesion collapsing, more direct control is required, which can be exerted over a lot less of an area. For militarily speaking, it will create black zone, while they may be patrolled more or less under martial law. These are essentially lawless areas.
Mm-hmm.
These have existed always in like martial law from the 1700s onwards.
Yeah, there will be issues there'll be areas that the states simply can't. Even just a case of like war zones. If you look at Northern Ireland, there are, or should I say, occupied Ireland. There are areas, specifically in the city of Derry, like the Cregan and the Bogside, that police are emphatically not welcome in. If police have to go into the Cregan or the Bogside, they have to send armed units. They have to send them with armoured Land Rovers and a convoy. If a cop was just walking along the streets in the Cregan or in the Bogside, he'd get stabbed. He'd get killed.
Yeah, and this can prop up due to like. This is what I, for example, see happening in the United States to an extent, is that there will be a government crackdown against minority groups in, the usual areas, Portland, New Orleans, everywhere where, guess what, where there's a lot of black people, let's be real. But a good example of that is Turkey. That will have effects on other areas of the country that the government can't really foresee. This is what essentially happened in Turkey. They cracked down on all of a sudden areas that are fairly homogeneous and very Turkish started to become lawless. Like, Central Eastern Turkey used to be a very safe area for the Turkish military, but starting with the pogroms, let's call them what they are, against the Kurds, in Diyarbakir in like the early 2010s. Suddenly there was a lawless area where people sat in the mountains with old assault rifles shooting at cops whenever they came near.
Yeah, not even that.
The US, let's go ahead.
Like, specifically during the siege of Kobane, because Erdogan said he was aiding Islamic State. We know he was. What the Kurds decided to do, what the youth wing of the PKK, the Yiddigash, the YDGH, what they did was they took control of the city of Jizra, they set up blockades, and the army could not fucking enter into these areas. They were stuck. And the only way that they were allowed into these areas was when Abdullah Öcalan himself gave the command from prison, ordering the YDGH to stand down. And now, I think that, as you're about to say, I think the same situation is going to apply in the United States. That areas that have fucking historically been very anti-police in the United States.
Let's not forget that the United States is fucking massive.
Agreed.
Oh, absolutely.
It's fucking massive. And let's also not forget the places like Michigan, Alaska. The army couldn't enforce law there if it wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
There's like massive swaths of
forest.
Yeah. Just unused land.
Just emptiness.
Just
wilderness.
Trees for fucking not just miles, thousands of miles in some
Mountains,
cases, especially up in Canada.
Deserts, all of that.
Like, I don't
There's
know.
just tons of totally empty territory.
Yeah, and I remember
That will become a haven for people who are going to be fleeing government crackdowns.
Yeah.
They will inevitably go to those areas. And every now and again, some of those outposts and camps get raided and destroyed. But what I think what is being missed here is the fact, what are you going to do? You can't kill them all.
Exactly.
Like you can't, because you can't find them all, for one.
And I remember when I was flying to Oregon a couple of years ago, I had to fly through Seattle to get to Portland. And the thing that I noticed when I was looking out my plane seat window, it's just empty. There's nothing there. And the issue is like, it's completely rural. And definitely I think that is going... Honestly, I'd say that's where Maoists in particular, and I'm not a Maoist, by the way, I think that's where Maoists actually have a good idea, the whole idea of protracted people's war. And I'd actually, before we continue on with this, I'd like to read a message from a supporter, who says we are bang on the correct lines of dealing with the fash and the government being armed, and that small operating cells stockpile, learn all about the military, the local military and their tactics, how they react, as well as learning guerrilla tactics, links, building networks, learning other languages, self-defense and hand-to-hand. So it's imperative, I think, that we need to... And here's the thing. I think Go on.
I know why the Maoists have a better idea about how to fight in the United States than we do. Rather, a lot of cells. It's because a lot of, even in the US, a very European idea of warfare. What I mean by that is, in Europe, except for Sweden, again, fuck Sweden, but except for, areas in, like, rural Sweden, everything is really close together. You can't hide from the army in like Germany. It's just small comparison, and it's ground to cover. There's no area anywhere in Germany, except maybe the Alps, where you are ever more than a kilometer from any human dwelling, and by extension, probably a police presence. You can't. So the idea. So in those places, you need to be very underground. You need to be, sort of in the masses, because otherwise you can't.
Yeah.
But applying that to the whole is I think the mistake that is being very often made, simply because you cannot compare that sort of thing. Like, if the US were a normal country, like, say, in heads, New York and Washington are pretty close together, right?
They're not.
Well, in reality, Washington, D.C. is the landline between Warsaw to Madrid.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we're talking here.
Yeah.
Those are within individual states that are very, very urbanized. Like, say, what's a very urban state? Rhode Island, or whatever. Sure, that sort of organization will have who are in those areas, but the country's huge.
Yeah.
The nation is, I struggle to call it a nation, but the entity that calls itself the United States and Canada. Canada will be an asset, I think, simply because of its vast.
Oh, absolutely.
To this day, there are. This is something I think that happened as well in the, to an extent, happened in the Russian Civil War. There were cells of the White Army that didn't know that the Civil War had ended until 1936.
Yeah, and I think the...
Like in 1936, Red Army came onto an island and were shot at by a bunch of people who had barricaded themselves there fucking 15 years earlier.
Yeah.
Think about that for a moment.
And I think the issue as well, and I think Senna will concur with me on this, is that even though a lot of the American left has they've rejected, inverted commas, social democracy and the Democrats, a lot of them are still sticking to this idea of that, the revolution in the United States is going to be, it's 5 years, we're going to fight like a regular fighting force, and then when it's over, it's all going to be the same. It's not. The whole thing is, with a revolution in the United States, because the United States has been built from the ground up to be completely antithetical to socialism, to left-wing ideals, their children, American children, are raised brainwashed to hate left-wing politics. They're brainwashed by the school system, they're brainwashed by the news media, they're brainwashed by cultural norms, by societal norms, to hate left-wing politics. Our struggle in the United States is going to last 2 decades, at the very least. Or a decade and a half. It's not going to be an easy fight. And I think ultimately the people who have the best idea on how to wage revolution in the United States are Maoists and insurrectionary anarchists. The idea of the cell structure and loose networks of organisations. Senna, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you seem right so far.
Like, that's exactly what I'm... Yeah. That's what I meant.
No, you're fine. Like, Are you going to say something or not?
Yeah, all I really wanted to say is that the reason that Maoists have an idea of how to do this is because, China is a more comparable country to the United States because it's really big and there are really, really super urban areas that are a ridiculous size away, but also huge swaths of the country where there's just nothing for miles and miles.
Yeah. And, were you gonna say something, Sana?
Yeah. Something that people really need to understand here is revolution everywhere, really, but especially in places like the US, is going to be long. It's going to be brutal. It's gonna have to be fought as asymmetrically as possible, because even at our best, we will never have the numbers to compete with forces like the US government. So we're going to have to use tactics that work with that. We can't just fight them head on. That means we gotta get down, we gotta get dirty, we gotta...
Yeah.
It's...
We gotta sit and wait. That's the most painful
bombing,
thing.
though. That's that's a big no-no.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Really, what will have to end in the end have to happen is people will have to sit there, and as stupid as it sounds, wait for a while. Not in their houses, but as organized cells will have to sit and wait for something to happen, and that something more likely than not is the inevitable splintering of the United States.
Yeah.
Because the global economy is going to.
And
as a result of that, people will get more and more angry at the federal government, and even right-wingers will then turn to state nationalism, right?
Yeah.
Texas, California already exists, but what will end up happening is that these states will fall apart.
Agreed.
The state will fall apart, it will splinter, and in the end you're left with 50 or more or less independent entities that are more or less at war with each other.
Yeah. And I think only Bro555 has mentioned in the chat, Michigan has a lot of militia groups such as 3%ers, and I think this is important to realise. As you were saying, a lot of these militia groups are going to turn to state nationalism. And the whole issue, I think that a lot of the advantage that we will have over them is that 3%er militias and nationalist militias in the United States have a hierarchical structure. They're not democratic. The leaders in these fucking movements will make mistakes, and their soldiers and their followers will hate them for it. And do you want to know the best thing? These people won't be removed. These people can't be removed. They are not accountable. And honestly, I think a lot of these groups are just going to splinter due to infighting, as a lot of the right wing in America already has done. And the whole issue with that as well is that I think one more point from me before we move on to the final words, and then we move on to our last topic. The whole idea of viewing the United States as one big whole and something that we're going to have to completely overthrow. Completely overthrow as in, like, you know, keep it the same but overthrow the current government. That's just not going to happen. You've got a lot of these people who, like, I'm sure you guys will remember the whole Bernie or riot kind of people. Like, oh, if we don't get Bernie, we're going to riot. That's a problematic mentality in my mind, because it's basically saying if we don't get a social democrat and we're going to riot, you're basically advocating for militant social democracy. And I think the issue is with the United States specifically is that a lot of it's going to be, like, as somebody has correctly said in the chat, it's going to make the Russian Civil War and the Syrian Civil War look like a fucking meme. It's going to be hard, and it's going to be brutal, and it's something that we need to prepare for.
It's going to last longer.
Exactly, and
I think it actually will be very, very comparable to the Chinese Civil War.
Yeah, and I think,
you know, central government will collapse, and then you have what's essentially warlords. There will be a warlord period in the United States. I promise you that.
Yeah, and I think... go
on. If I may, I would move on to my own final statements.
Okay, go on.
the United States is a series of a few 100,000 municipalities that are essentially under military occupation. All right, there is no such thing as a American culture. That's not a thing because it's not an actual nation, even by the definitions of actual nationalism. There's nothing that unites all of these people together other than the fact that they are under a military occupation. Now, there is a New York culture. There is a culture of New Orleans. You know, those local places definitely have cultures, but they're all distinct from one another. And, well, that's why tactics have to be very varied. In the north, you're going to have to be sitting in forests in a very Turkish partisan sort of way. You know, you're going to have to be sitting in constantly moving outposts, dodging police patrols. But in, like, other places, like in the south, it will have to be a sort of organization very reminiscent of resistance groups, civil resistance groups rather, in the Second World War, right? Because, you know, we all know that the partisans in Yugoslavia were very, very effective. But that's because the terrain and political and social situation in Yugoslavia allowed for that kind of warfare. You could not do that in the forests of France, simply because the people are too close together.
Yeah, and I think
in France, you can still have an effective resistance. It just has to look completely differently. In the same vein, I think that there is a place for militias that rove through the forests, the deserts, the plains, the mountains, whatever, of the more disparate areas of the United States, while also in very urban areas, a sort of urban, very much like the French and more aptly the German anti-Nazi resistance, which, while small, existed, and they should look modeling because you will be organizing yourself in an urban environment against the fascists, which will come with a lot of tactics.
Yeah.
That's when infiltration can happen, when we're already down the shitter. That's when you can start infiltrating things, because fascists are dumb. Let's be honest, fascists are dumb, and unless they are given evidence to the contrary, the pure, the white, and whatnot are the loyal.
Yeah.
Even though that often isn't the case.
Yeah. I think with that, Senna, do you want to give a final statement?
Yeah. Ultimately, something people also need to understand is that the society we create whenever we hit the point where this stuff is done and over with, whatever area, is going to be completely unrecognizable. It has to be. You cannot replicate the ways of organizing, the ways of doing pretty much everything that have occurred under here. Just like you need a diversity of tactics for actually fighting capitalism wherever you are, you need a diversity of tactics for making the world that you want to. Because it needs to fit with your area, it needs to fit with the circumstances, it needs to fit what people need. And the answer to that is never going to be the same anywhere. You can speculate all you like, but ultimately you're not going to come that close. The only way you're going to figure it out is actually getting there, getting to that point, and doing that thing. And honestly, trial and error. Not everything you try is going to fucking work.
Yeah. Because
that's an important thing. We are going to fail. We're going to fail twice, thrice, 15 times. But you know, something like us at the very least. Yeah.
And every failure is a success in disguise. And I think my final statement on the matter is
don't cling on to like shitty ideas that didn't fucking work.
Yeah. And I think my final statement on the matter is what I think American leftists should do as of right now. I think American leftists right now should buckle in, prepare for the storm that is to come, and I think ultimately the best way to do that is to organise locally, and if you have the numbers, try and create a counterculture to American capitalism in your own local communities. If you can't do that, if you don't have the numbers or the ability or the monetary for it, or the money for it, the most important thing you can do is get a group of like-minded comrades in your area, form a cell, train together, prepare together, make sure you've got a plan for whatever goes on, make sure you're networked with other people in different parts of the state or in different parts of the country, got somewhere to go if shit kicks off. And most importantly, stay away from federal electoral politics. I don't fucking give a shit if Bernie or AOC comes back in 4 years' time. If shit hasn't kicked off by that point, then stay away from them. They will just disappoint. And I think the most important thing right now that you can do is know your area, know your local area, know the people in it, and again, train again, pick up a gun, and train with it. Because that training, that preparedness, is going to be the difference between life and death. And I think with that, we will move on to our final topic for this evening, which is the dual economic crises that are going to hit the United Kingdom. And obviously, like, kind of somewhat related to the last topic. For those of you unaware, and I honestly don't understand how you could be unaware because we've all been fucking going through it for the past couple of months, the coronavirus pandemic has wreaked fucking havoc, especially in Europe. And, I mean, not to the same degree in the United States. The United States is a whole different fucking beast.
Yeah.
If you were unaware, the United Kingdom now has the highest death rate from coronavirus in Europe. And it's already reporting that businesses by the fucking ton are closing, and tens and hundreds of thousands of people are losing their. There is an unemployment crisis coming now, and obviously with the pandemic, it's going to fucking destroy the British economy already. The Bank of England has predicted that the recession that's going to follow this pandemic is going to be something that this country will never recover from. If that weren't bad enough, that's the first economic crisis, the corona crisis. The second crisis is going to be Brexit. For those unaware, Brexit is still going ahead as planned. The British government has refused to push back the transition date from the time we formally transition from being a member state of the European Union to being an official independent in inverted commas nation. And as of right now, there is still no trade agreement that has been made. And we've officially been outside of the European Union for 4 months. The British government has refused to negotiate on it, and at the same time has refused to push the date back for negotiations as a result of the pandemic. And if you weren't already aware, the Bank of England is already predicting that there is going to be an economic crisis resulting from that as well. So basically, Britain is going to get a good old taste of double penetration. We're going to be hit with 2 economic crises, and I am going to, while I jump off for a second and go to the bathroom, I am going to leave you in the very capable hands of Senna and Theo, so I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Oh boy.
Now it's time to kill the Swedes.
I mean,
Okay. No.
you're putting things off to an excellent start. I love you so much.
Hey, they want to chemically castrate me, I'll chemically castrate their king.
Nice.
Royals should not be allowed to breed. Speaking of royals and their excrement, the United Kingdom. I'll be honest, I don't know much about what's going on in the UK specifically, but I can tell you a bit about what's going on in like Europe in general and how everyone is just shitting.
That would probably be a good idea.
Well, I have the lucky privilege of living in the country in Europe with the lowest infection rates and the lowest mortality rate in all of Central Europe. And that's because we've had pre-existing plans for this kind of pandemic starting fun enough with the U.S. polio epidemic, we're going to stay on quasi lockdown until the end of November, I think. So we lock down summer for now, at least. And it's really shown because the Italian economy just flatlined down. Only now grocery stores are being restocked. Italy was hit so hard and so fast that there was nothing people could do, really. And the same thing is starting to happen in Germany. It's happening in France. Is happening in Spain. So why are we fine? Well, it's because the Germans and the French and the Spanish were like, "Oi, guys, we gotta bring money back into people's lives." So they opened shit back up, and people immediately got sick. We're kind of starting to open up, but with very, very strong restrictions. Depending on the size of the building, there's only a certain amount of people allowed in every building. There is a face mask and glove mandate. Their restaurants can only do takeaway, and anything that isn't like a super essential service, like say an electronic shop, has to only allow people in for a limited amount of time. Also, don't touch things, yada yada yada, that sort of stuff. And these aren't laws. This is not enforced by the cops. Right? This is just like local health officials going, all right, this is what you should do. This is what the only law that we have is that stores need to tell you that and should not serve you if you do not conform to those standards. And it works.
I'm back.
And I think it proves you don't need the police or the state or whatever to enforce these sorts of things. You just need to build social etiquette, basic social etiquette, really.
Yeah.
Usually, if people are told, all right, you got to do this to keep yourself safe, they're gonna do it.
Yeah.
The reason that it's such a huge issue in the UK and in the US is because of something I briefly touched on earlier. The sort of toxic individual. It's the sort of me, and not recognizing that you have some sort of effect on the people and the collective around you, and thinking that it shouldn't matter. That's how you get people who cut holes into their face masks like fucking idiots.
And honestly,
I've literally seen posts of people being like, "My freedom matters more than your health." That's
fucking
basically a literal.
But yeah, honestly, I was more kind of talking about the economic aspect.
I know.
But obviously these things are important.
I was talking about that earlier.
Yeah, but these are important things to talk about, obviously. But but when it comes to the economic side of things, we were already predicted to be heading for a recession because of Brexit.
It's a what I was specifically touching upon was that the opening of the economy is just a blood sacrifice for money.
Yeah.
Totally.
I love how until everyone basically fucking screamed that the governments, most of the responses in Central Europe were like, all right, we're just gonna pretend there is nothing going on, and who dies dies.
Yeah.
And
I think the important.
And then Iran started to happen, and people kind of
kind of interesting on how Iran's kind of dropped off of the radar. Because of this.
Because everyone's dead.
It's almost because America... it's almost as America fucking up. And I'm kind of reminded of when the pandemic was in its infancy. Well, not in its infancy, but around a month ago. Sky News, the one of the main British news media outlets, said, "This country is pretending coronavirus doesn't exist." Now, if you... And it is on course for hundreds of thousands of deaths. Now... After fucking listening to that and reading that title, you'd think that's the United States for sure. Do you want to know what Sky News said it was? Belarus. They thought Belarus was the main country pretending like coronavirus didn't exist. And it's like, not as though the United States has been doing that. But
you know what? Pretty much all of the major economies, not just in Europe, just in general, have basically tried to avoid panic by we have in German there's this term, keeping a silence over something until it dies. Totschweigen. That's what's being done about this. This is, we haven't heard much about this sort of thing happening because it happens. It doesn't just happen in Russia, in Belarus, as said, in Ukraine, and in Poland. Those are the main examples I can think of. There aren't actually that many countries that accurately report their numbers.
yeah,
The Germans have stopped ages ago. The Germans are not even diagnosing people. They're just locking people into quarantine.
Yeah, the British
and not telling them what's wrong with them.
The British government is not reporting deaths in care homes, for starters. And that's the thing. That is the thing I'd like to touch upon as well, just bringing it back to Britain specifically. The whole issue with this as well is that with the economic crises that are going to come, there's inevitably going to be political crises. Because the economy is so interwoven into politics, the economy collapsing, it's going to collapse worldwide because of this pandemic. It's going to collapse doubly in the UK because of both the pandemic and because of Brexit. You need to take a look at the political side of things. The Welsh independence movement is actually gaining some traction. The Scottish independence movement is fucking riding high because of Nicola Sturgeon's, frankly, better handling of the coronavirus epidemic than Boris Johnson's. Like, everybody is... You've got even English people who say they hate Nicola Sturgeon, like, applauding her for her actions on coronavirus. So the Scottish independence movement is riding pretty high at the minute. And...
The IRA is back.
The IRA is, in fact, back. And that's... Well, I mean, the IRA never left. But the whole thing that we need to keep in mind is, like, when we leave, because areas of Scotland that you go to, if you go to areas in Glasgow, like places like Kilsyth, Cumbernauld, Kirkintilloch, these places have been fucking ravaged by austerity for the past 2-3 decades. They're predicting even more austerity to come. The same thing in Northern Ireland. And specifically, interestingly enough, Republican areas in Northern Ireland are often the most deprived. Places like the Bogside and Cregan. These places are really, really economically and socially deprived. And this is only going to get worse as time goes on. And as this goes on, like the Cregan and the Bogside were already like really fucking militant in opposing police presence. Can you imagine like how bad shit's going to get once we've got a dual economic collapse in this country?
It's important to point out there as well that there is no public response in most affected. So what response there has been from the actual UK government has been limited to London, Brighton, the south of England, basically. Now, where are they doing literally nothing? Cornwall, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, Northern Ireland.
Yeah. Well, then again, that's because...
And the Isle of Man, but, you know,
well, then
those
again,
guys are weird.
Then again, that's because the managing of the quarantine and lockdown has actually been devolved to the assemblies. And there was actually a big stink about this, actually, because basically England decided to throw up everything about a week or two ago. Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland have said that they wouldn't be following the British government with regards to that. And it kind of highlights the fucking disparity, because the British government gave the green light to people to basically say, oh, you can travel if you want, you know, just... And here's the thing. There was apparently, to my knowledge, a lot of English tourists who came fresh out of lockdown and decided immediately to head for the Scottish borders. And when the pandemic was in its infancy, you had Prince Charles, or Prince Philip, one of the fucking royal lizard parasites, had contracted the virus, and what did he do? Did he isolate? No, he fucked off on a fucking jolly to Balmoral in the fucking Highlands. The British government views Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales with utter contempt. And they think, you know what, if you don't want to come out of quarantine, that's fine by me. We'll give people the green light to go and fucking spread the virus there.
That's because they view them as colonial subjects.
Exactly. We're viewed as colonial subjects. And here's the thing. It's going to come... my honest prediction in this is it's going to come more and more to the fore that Scotland and Wales and occupied Ireland are treated as nothing more than colonial subjects, the remnants of the British Empire. Because that's what we're treated with. If you fucking look at some of the bullshit that you see on Twitter from English conservatives directed towards fucking Scottish people who are fucking say horrible shit about us that's honestly quite laughable. Like, they say the equivalent to like a racist fat white American saying, "Oh, black people only eat fried chicken and drink Kool-Aid." It's basically the same level of shit that, you know, middle class little Englanders come out with. And these...
On that note, how badly do you have to fuck up to flare the Welsh Republican movement when Wales has always been the most docile province ever since they murdered all the influential Welsh people in the 1500s?
Exactly. And I think the thing that we also need to remember is that the thing that we need to remember with regards to Scotland and Northern Ireland is that people who are loyal to Britain and are fanatically loyal, people like British loyalists in Scotland and Northern Ireland, are even more attached to the UK than people in the heart of England. And these people are going to be a problem. And I can honestly see... Okay, so my outlook for the future is this. We're going to have the dual economic crises. It's already been agreed that there will be a second Scottish independence referendum. That's old news. That's going to happen eventually. And when the dual economic... It's going to happen when the dual economic crisis hits its peak. Nicola Sturgeon is going to be forced into either immediately declaring an independence referendum to happen as soon as possible with a fixed date, or she will be removed from power. And the thing that I've noticed with regards to Northern Ireland is that official Republican parties, and I use the term Republican very loosely because fucking Sinn Féin, in all honesty, is fucking sold out to the Brit establishment. What is going to happen? You've basically got a rebirth of a militant Irish socialist Republican movement in Northern Ireland. And these groups are going to come to the fore in the coming future. And I think when it comes to... I think the big question, I think the final question we should ask is what should... Well, I mean, I think when it comes to what's going to happen in the UK, I should say that support Scottish independence, support Scottish national liberation, and the same thing for Irish national liberation, and the same thing for the Welsh national liberation. Support all of those movements. If you live in this country, follow the exact same steps that I said with regards to America. Form local cells. Do not get armed. Do not fucking pick up guns because that is jailbait as fuck. Do not do that. Do not commit random acts of terrorism. This is fucking stupid. And obviously we had the Coming Insurrection does not endorse violence. But
although I will say that certain people, let's call them in Northern Ireland, are definitely dig up definitely not existing weapons caches that were let's not forget that it was never disarmed.
For the most
yeah.
Well, not entirely, at least.
Yeah, well, they gave up a lot of their heavy equipment. AR-10s are still in a lot of basements, is what I'm saying.
Exactly. And
those are untraceable.
Yeah.
Because Gaddafi gave them those.
Exactly, and the issue...
Grandma's growing guns in the backyard. Just dig a little.
Yeah.
How does the song go? A comrade on my left, a comrade on my right.
And a clip of ammunition for me little Armalite. But, okay, crypto karaoke coming soon.
Cutie,
No.
I love you.
But,
No.
I think...
Veto.
I think obviously that, I think the thing that the question that, so obviously when it comes to Britain, if you live in this country and you're preparing for the economic crisis, because it is going to happen, and here's the thing, the British state it's more capable of enforcing authoritarian policies than the United States. It's more capable because Britain is smaller, and because, honestly, a lot of English people, for the most part, just don't give a fuck. But when that shit comes around, when we hit the dual economic crisis, when these things start happening, before then we need to be prepared, organised in cell structures. We need to network, we need to prepare, and we need to know our areas. This is important information. So I think when it comes to what we need to do in this country, if you're in this country, network, organise, don't do anything stupid, don't get yourself arrested, and just hang tight, hang fire, support the national liberation movements where you can and when you can and how you can. But I think I'm going to leave this next part up to you two, and that is, how should UK support revolutionaries in the UK when this shit kicks off, including the national liberation movements?
It depends on what exactly happens, really.
Yeah, it's very situational.
You know, it really depends on what the actual direct situation on the ground is, because you can't, you know, are we talking, you know, like, for example, you can't really support, you know, an actual guerrilla war. You can go and support in a sort of, you know, international brigade sort of thing, but guerrilla fighting, that's a little harder and a lot more blurry. Because while undoubtedly people, you know, came and went and supported the IRA directly, I'd argue that in that sort of fighting, that's not necessarily the best option that you have. In an actual war, that's a different story. But because in those sorts of positions, oftentimes I don't know. It's a tough question. I can't really answer what is the actual thing to do until we actually get to that sort of situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see very useful to make, you know, wild predictions that have like 1,000 fucking variables that may or may not come into effect. That's kind of pointless.
Yeah, and I think from my own perspective, what, at the very least, at the minute, what comrades outside of the UK can do is, again, support the national liberation movements in Scotland and Ireland and in Wales. I think, for the most part, that's the best thing you can do, is like support, spread word of the struggle, spread word of, basically, bring what's happening here to the world, because ultimately, when shit kicks off and the net gets cut off, we're not going to be able to be doing a lot of the reporting ourselves. So I think it's very important that a lot of people have an awareness of what's going to happen here. Because in all honesty, I think honestly Britain is probably going to be one of the main places where shit is going to kick off in the next 5 years. Just because there's too much fucking, well, not too much, but there's a lot of shit that could potentially happen. It's basically
just too much fucking.
You've got a powder keg basically, and this dual economic crisis is going to be the match that lights it up. But again, I think in all honesty,
one thing I want to ask, admittedly a bit tangentially related to this, is yes, absolutely spread the word on what's going on in other places of the world. That's a very thing, and like keep an eye on all those situations. That's very good. But something I've noticed a lot of people do that's actually kind of bad is people who seemingly get sucked into a weird sort of almost parasocial relationship with a mood. Like, you get people who are very fetishistic, Rojava, or whatever it is.
Exactly.
I mean, we've encountered were like that with the Hong Kong riots and stuff like that, where it was kind of all they talked about, and they're just like, oh, this is that. And it is like obsessive. That's not good. That's not healthy. Your main focus needs to be on what's going on around you.
Yeah, like, don't.
That's the only thing you can truly influence.
Don't fetishize our struggle. Our struggle is not there to be fetishized. Our struggle is but one struggle out of the hundreds that are going to come. You should keep, like, while spreading awareness of our struggle, your main focus, and, you know, basically keeping date with our struggle, your main focus should be what's going around you. We don't want to be fetishized. We don't want to be seen as fucking we don't want to be seen as the fucking apex. We will have a lot of problems. We will have a lot of stuff that we need to learn. So don't fetishize us. Don't fucking become like a lot of these idiot yank leftists, these fucking like middle class larpers who fucking fetishize the Kurdish struggle. Don't be the really fucking stupid people whose like fucking grannies, uncle, fucking dogs, hamsters, fucking chew-bone for rising. Like, don't do that. We all have a struggle to fight, and it's important that we support each other's struggles. But don't fetishize this struggle. Our struggle is but one of many hundreds, and even though we deserve to have our story told, our story is not the only one that deserves to be told. With that, we will collect final statements from everyone else. Senna, do you want to go first?
I've said most of what I need to say. Just don't be stupid about this, please. For the love of God, think. Use your brain.
We can't fuck up. We really cannot fuck up. And I think...
like, some mistakes are gonna happen, but try to keep it to a minimum. We can't afford everything we do to be a walking catastrophe.
So...
and that's what I see out of the American left right now, unfortunately.
No matter what ends up happening, there is but one struggle in which we are all united, something that we must all rally behind if we are to save ourselves as a whole. We must destroy Sweden.
For fuck's sake.
The Swedes, humanity has progressed past the need for Sweden.
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
I love you, hun, but...
I'm so sorry.
But, with that out of the way, I would like to thank every single one of you guys who have joined us here for the very, very first time on Drinks and Discourse on the Coming Insurrection. It's been an absolute pleasure having you, and I hope it was a pleasure to have us as well. We can tell you that this will be a weekly podcast. This will be happening every single Friday at around 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, if memory serves me correctly. So it's 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 11 p.m. British Summer Time, and I think right now for Theo that would have been about midnight your time, I think.
Yes.
So midnight Central European Time. Before we head off, though, two things I would like to say. The first is Coming Insurrection t-shirts are coming. They will be in the works. Don't you fucking worry about that. And also, secondly, we do have a Discord. We have a Discord server, and I am going to post the link to that in the stream chat. If you give me 1 second. Viagra. Let's see. Create invite. Edit invite link. And alright. I will post the link in the stream chat. It is there for all of you who want to join us. But for now, I would like to say it's been an absolute pleasure having you, comrades, and we hope to see you again next week. And I would like to say farewell, and we all bid you farewell correctly. Well, not correctly. I can't fucking talk. I'll see you guys later. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, see you.